I'm sharing my screen. So we'll do a recap. So in last session, we discussed about switch statement. We discussed about switch statements. So how switch statement will work? What is the syntax of switch statement, and when to use the switch statement, right? When to use the switch statement. You know what is a case? How to use the case? What is the default? So what is the recommendations to use? All this we have discussed about the switch statement. About the switch statement. And today today we will discuss we'll discuss about the looping control statements. We'll discuss about looping control statements. So basically we are done with conditional control statements like if and else and switch statements. Now we are starting the second type of control statements, which is looping control statements. Looping control statements. So the name itself says here, right? The name itself is saying that it is a loop. It is a loop, which means you're taking some iterations, which means you're doing the same task repeatedly. Loop means doing the same task repeatedly, right? You're doing the same task repeatedly. So so the looping control statements, okay, the looping control statements are called as, these are also called as iteration statements. It is also called as iteration statements. Okay. So so as I said, right? So these looping control statements or these iteration statements, okay, will execute the block of code. It will execute the block of code repeatedly, repeatedly, right? So you know that looping control statements are called as iteration statements, and basically the looping control statements are used for, okay, doing the same task repeatedly, which means it will execute the block of code repeatedly. It will execute a block of code repeatedly. And one important item to remember, okay, the loop will continue, or the loop will execute, or the loop is dependent on a Boolean expression, on a Boolean expression. So basically these looping control statements expects, okay, it expects some Boolean expression or Boolean value as a result. Okay. When the loop will get executed, when the loop will get executed, okay, when there is a Boolean value that is passed to the loop, that is passed to the loop. If you don't pass a Boolean value or Boolean expression, it will not execute. It will not execute. Okay. So in case, if you remember our variables topic, if you remember the variables topic, any variable declared inside a loop, any variable declared inside a loop, inside a loop, right? That is called as local variable. That is called as local variable, right? So these variables cannot be accessed outside these loops, outside the loops. For example, if you define any variable inside inside this loops, that variable scope is only up to that loop, only up to that loop, and those variables cannot be accessed outside. Those variables cannot be accessed outside. Okay. So these are the the rules and regulations of the looping control statements. It can be any loops. Okay. When you ask me how many looping control statements that we have, for example, if you take conditional control statements, you have if and else, right? And switch statement. Similarly, for looping control statements, we have two looping control statements. Okay, what are those two? That is for loop and while loop. For loop and while loop. And okay, for loop and while loop. There is one more loop called do while loop. Do while loop. Okay, it's a combination of do. Again, it's a while loop. Basically, we have two loops. One is for loop and another is while loop. And another is while loop. Why two loops? Okay, so basically we have for and while loops. Both are loops only. Both are looping control statements. Okay, both are looping control statements. Then why two? Why two? Why not one? Why can't we use one? Why two? If you ask me this question, why we have two looping control statements? Okay, there here it comes the scenario. Here it comes the scenario. What is that scenario? Okay, when to use the for loop and when to use the while loop. When to use the for loop and when to use the while loop. Simple. Okay, both are used for looping purpose. Both are used for looping purpose to do some task repeatedly. But if you know the number of iteration, if you know the number of iterations, then go for for loop. Then go for loop. Okay. If you don't know the number of iterations, if you don't know the number of iterations, number of times you are execute, how many number of times you execute the logic, right? If you don't know how many number of iterations you will be taking, okay, then go for while loop. Then go for while loop. Okay. So if you know the number of iterations that you're taking, then use, it is always recommended to use for loop. It is always recommended to use for loop. Okay. So if you don't know the number of iteration, then go for while loop. It is recommended to use the while loop. Okay. So for example, the scenario, I'll give you a scenario here. So think that you are writing a robotic program. Okay. So like most of you know this timer or a stopwatch, right? So let's say if I set 2 minutes time, if I set 2 minutes time, what it should do after 2 minutes? What it should do after 2 minutes? It has to stop. It has to stop, right? So you see that I know the number of minutes that I wanted to, where I wanted to stop. Okay, at the 2 minutes. So if I'm setting my timer to 2 minutes, I know the number of minutes now. I know the number of minutes where to stop. Then I'll go for loop. Then I'll go for loop. Okay. Now think that we are launching a rocket. We are launching a rocket to space. We are launching a rocket to space. Okay. Now I wanted to count. Okay, what is the time taken for traveling the rocket from Earth to space? I don't know how much time it takes, right? I don't know. I wanted to count the time, right? I wanted to count the time now. In first case, in the stopwatch, okay, I know how much time I can set. So I know how many number of minutes where I can go for loop. Now launch the rocket to space. Okay, I wanted to count the time. So how many milliseconds it has taken, or how many seconds it has taken, or how many minutes it has taken. So I cannot really estimate how much time it will really take to travel to space, right? Where when I don't know the number of iterations, I'll go for while loop. I'll go for while loop. If I know the number of iterations, go for loop. Okay. When to choose for loop? if you don't know the number of, if you know the number of iterations, blindly go for loop. For example, okay, there is a scenario given, like let's say I have 10 elements. I have 10 elements in a array. Somebody says, this is how they ask. I have a 10 elements in an array. So get me the max number out of the array of elements. Array. For example, this is the case or scenario they have given. Okay. Now you already know the count. There are 10 elements. There are 10 elements. If now I know how many searches I have to do. Now I know how many searches I have to do. So then I'll go for loop. So for example, if I say I have X number of elements, I have X number of elements in a list. Now, what is X? I don't know what is X now. So it can be 10, it can be 20, or it can be 30 or something like this. Okay. Now get the average of, so now get the average of last two elements in the list. Something like this. Now I'm saying X. X can be 10, or X can be 20, or X can be 100, or it can be 1000. I really don't know what is the X value now. Then I'll go for while loop. Okay. But the rules for loop and while loop, okay, what we have discussed, it is pretty clear. Okay. So looping control statements are called iteration statements. Either it can be a for loop or a while loop. Okay, both are called as iteration statements. So both will execute based on the boolean value or expression, boolean value or expression that is evaluated. Okay, so the boolean value means if the condition is true, then only the loop gets executed. If the condition is false, then it will not execute the loop. So do remember, if the condition is true, any use case or it can be a conditional control statement, or it can be a looping control statement, those will execute if the condition is true. If the condition is true, if the condition is false, it will not execute. If the condition is false, it will not execute. Okay, so any variable that you declare inside the loop, that is called as a local variable, and the scope is only within that loop. Outside the loop, you can't access it. These are the rules for looping control statements. So when it comes to the syntax, of for loop, okay, when it comes to the syntax of for loop, so it will use a reserved word or a keyword called for, and you will have an initialization block here. You will have a initialization block, and then a condition. Then you will have a condition, and then you will have an updation. Then the block of code executes. Then there is an open brace which says for loop started here, and you can have the statements inside it. You can have statements or block of code. Whatever the code you write, block of code here, and then the closing brace which says this is the end for my for loop. Okay, so how does it execute? What is the flow chart? Let us design the flow chart for how the for loop gets executed. Okay, so the processing flow, let us look at the processing flow, like execution flow, processing or execution flow of for loop. Okay, so how it executes. So if you remember what is an initialization, if you remember what is an initialization, assigning some value into a variable is called Initialization. It can be it can be a primitive variable or it can be a reference variable, right? Assigning some value into assigning some value into a variable is called initialization. So here, which means we are defining a variable and we are assigning some value to it. We are defining a variable and we are assigning some value to it. And how many times this initialization happens? How many times this initialization happens? So the initialization block will only execute once in the loop. Initialization only happens only once in the loop. Okay, only once the initialization block will be executed. So first it will start with maybe I'll take a new slide and I'll draw that. First it will start with initialization. So the variable initialization is the initiation point for the for loop. Okay, it will start with the initialization. So if you go then next thing is condition. Next thing is condition. So once the variable initialization happened, the second statement it will look for is the condition. It will go for the condition. So here it will look for the condition. So condition is like a decision, right? It's a decision. So condition can become a true, it can return a true or false. It can be valid or invalid, right? It can be a valid condition or it may be an invalid condition. So I have to decide here. I have to decide here. So it is a decision that I have to take it here. I'm not good at drawing. Just think that this is the decision box. Okay. Either the condition can be true or the condition can be false. The condition can be true or the condition can be false. If the condition is true, what happens? If the condition is true, then it will not go for updation. No, it will not go for updation. First, it will initialize, then it will verify for the condition. Third, it will execute the block of code. It will execute the block of code. Okay, whatever the statements that you have written, that it will execute. That is the third step it does. Okay, so if the condition is true, execute the loop body. Execute the loop body. Okay, then after executing the loop body, after executing the loop body, now finally once the once it has executed successfully, then fourth step is update. Okay, once the statements are done, then it will go for updation. Then it will go for updation. So after executing that, it will update. It will go for updation. Okay, it will go for updation. Then again, okay, after updation, then again it will go for condition check. Then again it will go for condition check. Okay, if condition is true, execute the loop body, updates the value, and then again go for verification. Again go for verification. Okay, until when this loop gets continued, till the condition gets false. Till the condition will become false. If the condition becomes false, then come out or break the loop. Okay, break the loop, and stop the flow. Stop it. Okay, so if you see, initialization executed only once. Okay, verification of condition happens multiple times. Okay, multiple times condition will be checked. Similarly, multiple times, okay, loop body executes, and multiple times it will update the value. It will update the value, right? That is the flow diagram or a flow chart for your for loop. So initialization happens only once, then it will go and verify for the condition. If the condition is true, execute the loop body, then go for the update block, and after updating, again it go and verify for the condition. If condition is true, execute the loop body, update the value, then go for condition. When this loop will continue till the condition becomes false, if the condition becomes false, then it will not execute the loop body, it will just break the loop. By default, it will stop it. Okay. And in case, if you mention an unconditional control statement, something like if I mention a break statement here, okay, in case if I mention a break statement, then it will not go for update, then it will directly go for stop. Okay, unconditional control statement. When I say condition is true, executed the loop body, and after that, after executing at the end of the statements, if I mention a break, if I mention the break statement, then it will not go for an update. From here, it will directly go and stop the loop. Okay. Or else, if you're not mention it, if the condition becomes false, automatically it will break the loop. So you can forcefully break the loop. You can forcefully break the loop, or else write a condition where write your condition or define your condition. At some point of time, the condition becomes false. If not, one problem it occurs is these loops will create deadlocks in the application. They'll create deadlocks in the application. If you don't write a condition, where it becomes false, okay, then the loop will continue and it will never come out of it, and that creates a deadlock situation. That is where your applications will hang, or it will go to a hang mode. Where your application goes to a hang mode, you need to restart your applications. You see, sometimes in mobiles and all, your applications get stuck and it will not do anything, right? Only thing, sometimes your phone will hang, right? Sometimes your phone gets hanged. So what you do, you power off the phone, then it starts working. So which means you have to do a shutdown of your system, and there is an outage of your application. You have to do a shutdown of your system, or there is an outage of your applications. So when you're dealing with loops, you should always make sure that at some point of time, the condition should become or must become false. If not, you have to use the break statement. Any of this has to happen. Write the condition properly. At some point of time, the condition becomes false, or if you are not confident, then go for break. Statement. Okay. So that's about the for loop. That's about for loop. So let us write one small program. To see how this for loop executes. Okay. So let us do one small test. We'll go for so I'll open up the new document. So the class name I'm giving it as for statement. The class name I'm giving as for statement. So now here I am writing the logic. So as per the syntax, the for loop will start with the keyword called for, and it will have a open brace and it will have a parenthesis. This will have the parenthesis, and it will have a open brace and closing brace. So here the for loop starts and here the for loop ends. And in this, first thing is the initialization. So it has to initialize a variable. So you have to declare a variable here. For example, x equal to 0. So now I have defined a variable here. I have defined a variable here. You see now, this is a this is a this is a local variable. This is a local way. I have defined inside a loop. I have defined inside a loop. So the scope of the variable is only from the opening brace to opening brace of the for loop to closing brace of the for loop. You cannot access outside the for loop. You cannot access outside the for loop. So now x is a variable, and I'm assigning valued 0 to it. So initialization happened in the first block and separated with a semicolon. Separated with a semicolon. Then I have to write a condition here. Okay. What is the condition I am writing here is, okay. Now I'm saying x less than or equal to 10. X less than or equal to 10. So I'm saying 0 is less than or equal to 10. If it is okay, if it is less than or equal to 10, the condition is true, then I have to write some logic. What is the logic I am writing? I'm just printing it. I'm just printing it. What I'm printing is, I'm just printing a star value. I'm just printing a star value. I'm just use system.out.print statement I'm using, and I'm printing a star value. Okay. So I am printing some star value here. Now after a print, the condition is successful. Some logic I have written, then it has to go for the update. So here I am updating the value of x. So how I will update? I'll use a increment operator. I'll use a increment operator. So x plus plus. I'll use x plus plus. So when I use x plus plus, it's a post increment operator. It's a post increment operator, right? So so here what happens? X value will be 0, x value will be 0, and 0 less than or equal to 10. Then it will execute this block of code. After executing this block of code, then it will go and update the value of x. Then it will go and update the value of x. So x value, how much it will become? It will become 1, right? X value will become 1. So now initialization only happens once. So it will not be initialized again. So x value will become 1. Okay, 1 less than or equal to 10. Then go and execute this loop. Then go and execute this loop. Okay, and till when it happens, till x equal to 10. Where till when it will execute the loop? Till x equal to 10, because less than or equal to I'm saying less than or equal to I'm saying, right? Now when x becomes 11, 11 is not less than or 11 is not equal to 10, the condition will automatically will return as false. The condition will automatically will return as false, right? Now let us save this code. The code is being saved. I'll open the command prompt here. Now I'll try to compile the code. So I think there is error in the code. Let me see. There is a some extra character. Okay, there is one additional. Then additional closing brace has come. That's the reason it has executed. There are actually three openings. One for the class, one for the method, and another for the block. So one additional it had, so it has given a problem. So compiling the code has compiled. Now let us execute it. See, It is just printing star, 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 star. So I wanted to print the X value, for example. I wanted to print the X value. Here I'm giving it a star. Okay. I wanted to print just the X value. Print the X value. Compile the code and execute. 0 to 10. When the now you see, okay, it has printed the X value, right? It has given the X value. Now when the X becomes 11, so the condition became false. The condition became false, and and this logic didn't get executed, Okay. So you have to write a condition. Where at some point of time, your condition will get your condition will become false. Now you know that there are number of iterations that you're taking is 10. The number of iterations that you're taking is 10. Okay. So this equals less than or equal to 10. This is deciding how many number of iterations that you're taking. Or instead of this, I'll just make it as true. Directly I'll give the value as true. Give the value as true. Okay. Now you see, I am compiling the code, executing it. There is no end for this. It will start counting the numbers just like that. You see that now this is a infinite loop. This is called an infinite loop. When you directly define the values there, true, and you're not even thinking about it. Like when the condition will become false. Now there is no way that I can stop this execution until unless I have to forcefully stop it. It won't get stopped. It will start counting till end. And if you see my machine resources, it is eating up like anything now. My CPU or task manager. If you look at the task manager, okay, look at my CPU utilization. Okay, look at my memory utilization. That was going, at a very worst stage. Right now, the utilization of my CPU is 81%, and that 85% of memory is being utilized from my system. Okay, you see that it will keep on increasing. Who's using the most? You see here, the terminal 3 is using the most. 12% of the CPU, and you know how much memory see the 12% of the CPU has been used by my terminal window. So this is my terminal, okay, which is using the most of the CPU now. Okay, and there is no end for this. Only thing how I can stop this program is I have to forcefully stop by pressing Control C. Okay, now I forcefully stopped it. Which means I have stopped my application, or I have restarted I have shut down my application. Now, in such case, what you have to do is, if you are mentioning such cases, then you have to mention a break statement. Now, the break statement also, you can mention it. Now, something like this. If x equal to 0, okay, the condition is true, this will get executed. I'll write a condition here. If x exactly equivalent to 10, if x exactly equivalent to 10, then break the loop. What I'm saying, the same condition, okay, where I have replicated in a different scenario. The similar condition, x less than or equal to 10. x less than or equal to 10. So now what happens, now I defined here the value of the condition as true, it will get executed. Okay, now x value will be updated, condition is true, then x value will become 1, then it will go for an update, then the condition is true, then it will print it, then condition is true. And here, okay, always the condition will be verified, always the condition will be verified. So for example, now x value is true, x value is 0, condition is true, it will print x value as 0, then it will 0 exactly equivalent to 10. No, the condition is false. So the break statement, it will not execute. Then go back and update the, update statement. Now x value will become 1, it will print 1. 1 is exactly equivalent to 0. No, condition is false. Then again go and update the value. Till what time? X equal to 10. So 10 exactly equivalent to 10. Okay, 10 is exactly equivalent to 10. So the condition becomes true. After 10, the condition will be broken. It will not go for an update now. It will not go for an update. So let us check that. I'll go and open up the command prompt. Compiling the code. Code has been compiled. Executed. It's the same output that I got like earlier. The same output I got like earlier. Right? So either you should make sure that, okay, at some point of time, your condition will become false here, or else if you are not mentioning that, okay, you at some point of time the loop is broken. At some point of time the loop is broken. If you're not doing both of them, then this will become an infinite loop. This will become an infinite loop. And once the application enters into the infinite loop, okay, applications will hang, and there is no chance of executing your code. You have to shut down your application and restart it. You have to restart it. So you have to be very careful when you're dealing with the loops. So loops creates the deadlocks. Loops creates the deadlocks in the applications. Okay. So any questions on this? Any questions on the for loop? I haven't discussed the while loop. On the for loop, do you have any questions? Any questions on for loop? Assuming there are no questions on the for loop, then we'll discuss about the while loop. If there are no questions, then I'll go for while loops. So the next loop that we have is a while loop. Okay. So the syntax of while. Okay. For loop, if you see, for loop, if you see, it is only accessed. It is if you see the initialization happened only within that loop, right? Inside for loop only the initialization happened, right? If you look at your for loop, initialization happened within the for loop itself. Now, when it comes to while loop, okay, so initialization we have to do outside the loop. Initialization you have to do outside the loop. Then you have to use a keyword called while, and while will take a condition as an input. It will take some condition as an input, okay, and then you will write the statement or block of code. You will write the statement or block of code here. Okay, so basically the loop body. This is called loop body. You'll write the loop body, and then you will write the updation statement. You will write the updation statement, and then closing statement. So if required, you can put a break statement also. If required, you put a break statement also to make at some point of time to make sure this condition is false. At some point of time, we should make sure that this condition is false. Okay, so initialization always has to happen outside the while loop, outside the while loop, and only condition is true, then it will go and execute it. Then you update it. Then you update it. Okay, so till when this while loop get executed, till the condition becomes false, till the condition becomes false. Okay, so here also the initialization happens only once. The initialization happen only once. Then it will go and verify for the condition. It will go and verify for the condition. Then if condition is true, okay, execute the loop body, the same loop, execute the loop body, and then update the value, then update the value. Okay, then once it is done, go and verify for the condition again. Go and verify for the condition again. If it is false, if it is false, the condition is false, stop it. Okay, but if both behavior is same, both behavior is same, but you look at the representation, the syntax. So everything in for loop happens in a single statement, where you do that, in a multiple statements in the while loop, where you do that in a multiple statements in the while loop. Okay, so here condition is mandatory. Okay, the condition is mandatory. Okay, and condition must be a boolean type. Condition must be a boolean type. And so simple to say while loop. Okay, in while loop, the same for loop what you have broken into pieces. You have broken into pieces, into multiple pieces. So in for loop also you have initialization. In for loop also you have condition. In for loop also you have block of statement. In for loop also you have updation, right? But everything happens in a single line, okay, in a different order. But here, if you look at, okay, here you look at, okay, while we'll take the condition, only the condition as an input. Updation logic you have to write manually. You have to write manually. So for loop, if you have to frame a for loop, you have to do everything. Okay, first you have to initialize, then condition, then updation value, then updation. It is mandatory. It is mandatory. But for while loop, it is not like that. Okay, updation is not mandatory. Block of code is also not mandatory, but the condition is mandatory. The condition is mandatory. For loop, all of the things are mandatory. All of the things are mandatory. Okay, so one thing. Now let us go and write one the same program with while loop. The same program with while loop. So this time I'll change the class name as while statement. This I'll change it as while statement. So the code is been saved. Now instead of for loop, I'll write the while loop. So first I'll create the deadlock situation. So while true, just print Nimro College. Okay. So here I am not breaking the loop. Here here I am not initializing now. Here I am not initializing anything now, right? And here I'm not verifying any condition. I'm directly passing the value. I'm directly passing the value, and I'm trying to print it. And I'm not breaking the loop also. I'm not breaking the loop also. Just saving this code. So which means I have created a deadlock situation here. So this there is no way that this condition will become false now. I have not written any logic to make sure that this condition is coming as false, right? So now, so now this is how the deadlock is created. Let us see that, and let us go and compile the code and see that now. Code has been compiled. You see that, okay? My window is not responding at all. My window is not responding. I'm trying to type. Maybe I'll take my screen, on screen keyboard, and I'm pressing enter, or I'm printing something. It's not responding. It is not responding now. It is not responding now, right? So I have to forcefully stop it. Nothing is happening. You see now, okay? You see now, I have forcefully stopped it. I have forcefully stopped it. Okay? So my application will get hanged. The application will get hanged for while loop. So I have to write the initialization statements outside the while loop. So now I'll say int x equal to 0, int x equal to 0, print x, print that x value here, print the x value here. And now what I will do is, okay, I'll update the value. I'll update the value I plus plus, x plus plus. The value is x I have defined, x plus plus. Now here, if I'll write a condition, if x is exactly equivalent to 10, then break it. So when you have one single statement, when you have one single statement, only one single statement, then you don't need to define, or when you don't need to you don't need to define the opening braces and closing braces if you have only one single statement. So I have only one single statement, only the break loop. So I'm not opening a opening brace or closing brace. It's not mandatory. You can put, or you can open it, you can open it, you can write a opening brace, you can write a opening brace, and you can close also, you can do a close of that if block, or else this is not mandatory. If you have one single statement, this is not mandatory. So now x equal to 0 while true, the condition is true, so it comes, it will execute this, then it will update, then x value will be 1. So 1 is equivalent to 0, condition is false, then it will go on execute, then it will print 1, then it will make it, then the x value will become 2, 2 is equivalent to 0, no, so it will not execute this break statement, then go, and it will go and update, okay, the value till x becomes 10. If x becomes 10, automatically the break statement will execute, and the loop will be broken. The loop will be broken. Compiling the code. So the code has been compiled. Now executed. So now it printed till 9. When x became 10, the loop has been broken. The loop has been broken. Okay. So assume that I defined a variable int, okay, int I equal to 10. int I equal to 10. Inside the while loop, I defined a variable. So this is a local variable now. This is a local variable. So now the scope of this local variable is starting from here to till this, right? Yeah, and I cannot access that I variable over here. Okay, after the while loop, I cannot access it. So now I'll try to print the I value outside the while loop. Outside the while loop. You see that I'm trying to print the I symbol. I'm trying to print I, the variable, it okay, cannot find the symbol, it says. It cannot find the symbol because the scope of this variable is only within this block. Only within this block. It cannot come outside. It cannot come outside. If I do the same thing inside the block, then it is okay. Because it's a local variable and local variable scopes are only from the opening brace of the block to closing brace of the block. So I'm trying to print now within that and see now the code will compile happily. So local variables, any variable that you define inside a loop, or when any variable that you define inside a loop, that is called as a local variable. That is also called as a local variable. So local variable scope is only within that loop. You cannot access outside the loop. The same thing applies for also. Okay. So these are the looping statements that we have. These are the looping statements that we have. So any questions? Any questions? Assuming there are no questions, so we'll wind up the session now. We'll wind up the session and yeah, please practice this. Please practice these loops so that you'll have some understanding on it. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.